Good evening. Thank you for coming. This is the first of our series this year at the University Colloquium for Adventist University. Our theme this year is resilience, and our speaker, I think, will be giving some definitions and relating some of his own experiences as well. Just so that you know, this is the first of three, as I mentioned. Our next one is first week of February, and then the first week of March, we have a second one. In February, we have a man named Deo. I won't attempt to pronounce his last name. He's from Burundi and has a remarkable story of being a refugee, going to medical school here, and then going back to Burundi to start some clinics and other types of things like that. Remarkable story. And then in March, we have Dr. Angela Duckworth. She's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania and has developed the GRIT scale, which is a scale of self-reliance and resilience and that type of thing, quite a widely used one, and so she'll be coming here in March. So please check our website, adu.edu, for those dates and for the RSVPs and so forth as well. So we'll look forward to that. Our program this evening, we're going to, after I finally sort of wrap things up, we have a gentleman that will be introducing our speaker. I'll say a word about him in a minute. And then after David's talk, we will have time for questions and answers. There's a mic on either side of the side aisles there, and if you could just line up there, and we will go from there. And then after the question and answer, there will be a book signing, and books will be on sale out in the lobby. So if you want to avail yourself of that as well, that would be good. How many were at one of our events last year, if you could raise your hand? Okay, that's good. And so the first time people, raise your hands. A lot of our students I see, and some others. That's great. So we have already begun plans for next year as well. So just want you to know, next year our theme is going to be integrity. Last year was moral courage. This year, resilience. Next year, integrity. And we're already working on speakers for that as well. So keep abreast of the events as they come up on our website, and we would love to have you come as well. I'd like to begin with a prayer. If you don't mind, let's bow our heads. Lord, we thank you for safe travels for our speaker. Thank you for the opportunity this evening to consider the strength and courage that it takes to face the challenges of life. Thank you for your blessings in our lives, and be with us now in the time we spend together. Amen. The gentleman that will be introducing our speaker is Darren Barnes. He is currently a student at Adventist University and was a trainer for David. He may speak more about that, I'm not sure. And so I'd like to invite you to come up right now and introduce our speaker.
The day that the doctor told me it was time to discharge me, I had been in the hospital for the 6th day. He sat me down and he explained to me that I had multiple sclerosis and what that disease would do to me. I looked at the doctor and I said to him, "You know medicine, but you don't know my God." And that day changed my life forever. This disease will put you in a wheelchair unless you fight it. I decided to beat disease through bodybuilding. I get my strength from the strength of God, and if it wasn't for Christ in my life, I would never be able to do what I'm doing. I struggle every day to move the way I used to. I have to lift my leg in and out of the leg machine, but I do the workouts, and then I crawl out of the gym, and I'm not going to stop doing them until I get buried. This is not a battle that you want to fight alone. This has to be done with the will of God in your life for you to be able to beat this. It really hit me that I had a disease when I went to grab the hand of my son, and I couldn't feel it. God didn't give me MS. He allowed me to have MS because he knew that I would be an inspiration to others.
thank you. Thanks everybody for coming out. I just wanted to talk briefly about how I actually met David. I've known David for a number of years now, and when I first met him, he was about 47 and had just recently been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I didn't know it at the time that he had the disease. My training partner in the gym was David's neighbor. So he brought David into the gym to start working out with us, and we began training for a couple of months, and David came to me and he said, after one of the workouts, and he said, I have something I want to talk with you about. So we sat down in the office, and he said to me, I have this idea, and I want to run it by you. And I remember I laughed, because how many crazy stories start out with that phrase, right? And I had no idea how crazy it was about to get. He said, I want you to train me for a bodybuilding competition. And at 47 years old, that's difficult in itself. So we talked about it for a little bit, and I said, okay, let's do it. And then he says, oh, by the way, I have MS. So it became a whole lot more difficult, and it challenged me. I didn't know if I was the right guy to help him out. And I sat down with my manager at the time, and I expressed my doubts to him, and he had kind of a unique way of looking at things. He said, well, I said, what if he gets hurt? And he said, well, what's the worst that can happen? He already has MS, right? So that's when David and I decided to set out on this journey, and we decided that he was going to battle this disease head on. He was going to face it and defeat it through health and fitness and bodybuilding. So I'm going to let David explain the rest of the story. But I just wanted to say, when I first heard that the theme for tonight was resilience, I immediately thought David Lyons. Because when you set out to take on a challenge the way that David took on, and your doctors tell you you're going to end up in a wheelchair sooner, and that you need to stop, when your own body fights you every step of the way, and when there's constant setbacks, but yet there's that unwavering belief in yourself, and the voice of God speaks so loudly in your heart that it drowns out all of that negativity, and it says to you, get up one more time. Keep moving forward. You can do this, and you will succeed. And that's exactly what David did. He listened. He kept getting up over and over and over until eventually he reached his goal. So to me, that is resilience, and that is David Lyons. It's my pleasure to introduce the most resilient man that I've ever met, and I'm proud to call my friend David Lyons.
Thanks, buddy.
As we say in New York, how you doing? So tonight we're going to talk about resilience. And no matter where you look to find the meaning of the word resilience, you find very similar definitions. So I'm putting these on the board so you could follow me, and I'm going to read through them, because unless you really understand the meaning of this word, you really can't grasp what resilience is. So let's go through what they say in Webster's dictionary. Resilience is the ability to become strong, healthy, or successful again after something bad happens. Now, the operative word here is again, which is really meaning that at one point you were healthy or successful or strong, and then you had to regain that. The capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. In the Wikipedia, resilience is more specifically called a psychological resilience, and it is defined as an individual's ability to properly adapt to stress and adversity. Stress and adversity can come in the shape of family or relationship problems, health problems, or workplace and financial stressors, among others. Individuals demonstrate resilience when they can face difficult experiences and rise above them with ease. Resilience is not a rare ability. In reality, it's found in the average individual. and it can be learned and developed by virtually anyone. Resilience should be considered a process rather than a trait to be had. This is a common misconception that people who are resilient experience no negative emotions or thoughts and display optimism in all situations. Contrary to this misconception, the reality remains that resilience is demonstrated within individuals who can effectively and relatively easily navigate their way around crisis and utilize effective methods of coping. In other words, people who demonstrate resilience are people with positive emotionality. They are keen to effectively balance negative emotions with positive ones. And it continues and explains even more that resilience is composed of particular factors attributed to an individual. There are numerous factors which cumulatively contribute to a person's resilience. The primary factor in resilience is having positive relationships inside or outside one's family. It is the single most critical means of handling both ordinary and extraordinary levels of stress. So let's take a deeper look at that last statement, which to me says it all. The single most critical aspect of resilience is having positive relationships. And in my case, the most positive relationship that I had, which took me from despair to victory, was the one I had with my Lord Jesus Christ. In my darkest hours, in my deepest pain, I focused my attention on God and not myself, and He did the rest. And later, of course, He delivered other positive people in my life, like my wife Kendra, of course Darren, and people along the way. But I'm going to tell you a story tonight, and it's going to sound like my story, but it's really not my story. This is God's story. It's God's story of grace, His story of love, and His story of strength. And through His power, anyone can be resilient. Now, resilience is not determination, and it's not drive. It's not perseverance, because people think that they've persevered or they have this big determination and drive to be successful, and they relate that to resilience. But that's not what resilience is. In my whole life, I've been very, very successful. I was a successful champion athlete. I was a success in businesses. I owned health clubs at an early age and did very, very well at them. Of course, I had ups and downs like everybody else has. And I had the struggles that everyone has that it takes to be successful. But the biggest surprise in my journey in life basically happened in 2006 when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And the funny thing is, I was actually diagnosed right across the street at the cancer hospital, so this is kind of ironic that I'm here. But my story, it's very long, and it could go back a really long time, and I could almost start talking to you about when I was in my diapers, and we could talk about the successes from that point. But what we'll talk about tonight is what happened to me when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I was working out in the gym like I normally did. I was a healthy athlete, never really had major injuries, broken noses from being a fighter and, those type of things, but nothing that was health-related, catastrophic. And I was in the gym and I'm working out, and I started feeling a tremendous pain in my shoulder. First thought in my mind is, am I having a heart attack? Because it was, I'm at this point 47 years old, and I'm getting older, and I'm thinking, is this pain my heart? And I kept working out, and then I started getting really numb and tingling and kind of a weird feeling in my left arm. And I still kept working out because, I thought I was Superman, and, I can't have a heart attack. That just doesn't happen to me. So I kept pushing. Now, here's where we talk about resilience or stupidity, okay? Was I stupid because I kept ignoring these symptoms and it kept going further through my body? Went down my arm, then started going down my leg, and I started to get very uncoordinated and lots of pain and tingling and just weird things going on. But I just kept ignoring it. And I can't say to you today that that was resilience, because it's kind of stupid. I mean, when you have those type of symptoms, you go right to a doctor. Well, I didn't do that. Months went by, literally about 2 months, to the point where I could not feel anything from here down. And I was struggling to walk, and I was struggling to maneuver around anything. I mean, my own kids had to lift me out of a pool because I couldn't feel my legs after swimming. I would try to get out of the pool, and I would fall down, and they would have to lift me up. And still, I didn't go to the doctor. And what I did is I got on an airplane because I was in the television business. And I wanted to sell some projects that I was working on. So I got on an airplane to go to California, and I lived here in Orlando. I lived in Celebration. And on this flight, I started feeling worse and worse. But when I got to California, I was out there for about a week pitching my projects to all these networks. And each day that went by, it would get worse and worse and worse. By the time that I left California and they put me on an airplane, and I was with another gentleman at the time, he was carrying my bag, literally had to walk me into the plane, sit me into the seat. And I sat on this airplane for 5 hours or more coming from California back here to Florida, tingling, pain everywhere, thinking to myself, what is going on here? I can't feel anything. And every minute felt like an hour on that plane. I couldn't wait to get home. So when I got home, I finally stopped being stupid. And I went to the doctor, and they did an MRI. But I wouldn't go into a closed MRI, which is probably the smarter thing to do. I had to go into an open MRI because it felt to me like a coffin. So I said, I won't go in there, and they put me in an open MRI, and they did the MRIs. And within 2 days, the doctor's calling me, and he said, you need to rush into a hospital. I already have you admitted here at the cancer hospital in Orlando. We see a big tumor in your brain, and we don't know what that is. So we're suspecting it's not good. When I get to the hospital, I am here, and they're doing tests on me, but they're not doing the right tests yet. They're just doing blood tests. And a brain surgeon came in, and he said, David, you have, based on this MRI that I'm looking at, and the blood work saying that your body is, white cells are weird, and you have brain cancer probably. And I need to cut your head open to find out what's going on in there. Now think about this, guys. You're basically a healthy person, and you're thrown into the hospital after months of losing feeling and getting paralyzed. And here's a doctor telling you, I'm going to cut your head open, and we're going to see what's going on in there. We have to remove this tumor, which is probably brain cancer. And I said to him, okay, so you remove this thing, and what happens to me? And he said, well, where this is at in your brain, it's so close to nerves in your spinal cord that are connected to your brain somehow. And I don't understand any of this. I'm not a medical student. I don't get what they're talking about. All I know is he's cutting my head open, removing something, and he's telling me you're either going to be paralyzed from the waist down after I do this, or you die. So I said, okay, so what are my odds here? My odds are 50% I'm paralyzed, or 100% I'm paralyzed, and 50% I'm dead. So I said, that's not happening. I wouldn't let him do it. And I literally threw him out of the room. One of the nurses heard what was going on and said, okay, I heard this, but I'm not getting this. So I'm calling a neurologist, and you guys have amazing doctors here. I mean, this guy was just one off, but the neurologist, the neurologist was great, and he came in and he said, Dave, I cannot believe this is brain cancer with the type of symptoms you have. Let me run a battery of tests. And he did 6 hours of MRIs. He did a spinal tap. He did more blood work. And he did everything that he should have done that the first doctor really should have taken care of. And he came into the room, and I'm in the hospital now 5 days. And the funny story is I couldn't feel anything. So when I had to go to the bathroom, they wanted to catheterize me. And I said, that's not happening. I will find my way to the bathroom, and I will stand there until things start happening, but you're not doing that to me. And I prayed every day, God, just let me go to the bathroom. Don't catheterize me. And so, luckily that happened. But the doctor said to me after the 5th day, he said, we're going to discharge you tomorrow, but I hate to tell you have multiple sclerosis. I had no idea what multiple sclerosis was. To me, muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis, it's all the same thing. It's a disease. I had no idea what he was talking about. He explained it all to me, and on the day that they wanted to discharge me, the 6th day, he sat me down one last time and said, this disease has been in your body for 10 to 15 years, and because you were strong, you were able to fight it, and because you were an athlete, you ignored some of the symptoms that maybe somebody else would have come in. As a fighter, I thought I slurred my speech because I got hit in the head too many times. You could hear me now. I kind of sound like that. But, I did not take to any of those symptoms. And when I think back, I probably do remember being uncoordinated at times, slurring my speech, and probably I did know something was going on. But again, I thought it was from fighting. But he said to me, because this disease has attacked you so dramatically and so drastically in this first attack where you really, from here down, became a mess, you are going to be in a wheelchair. There's no other way around it because this disease puts you in a wheelchair, and the damage to the nervous system is just taking you there. So just be prepared. And I said to him, I'm not going to be in a wheelchair. I said, and like I said in the little clip there, you know your medicine, and that's great. But my God has a lot more power than that. And my God is not going to let me be in a wheelchair. And there's some purpose in this thing, and I'm not going to listen to that. So they tried to wheel me out of the hospital, and you all know that you can't leave a hospital unless they wheel you out. And I gave them the worst time about that, but I finally said, okay, I want to get out of here. So they put me in a wheelchair, wheeled me downstairs, got into the lobby, heaved myself out of the wheelchair, and wobbled my way out the front door. And I've never sat in a wheelchair since then because I knew that God was giving me the strength to fight this. I had to realize when I got home that I had an incurable disease. Now, I'm sure there are people here that have had family members that have had diseases and cancer and things like that. And the devastation in your mind of realizing that you have something that's not ever going to go away is mind-boggling. I mean, it puts you in a state of, how do I deal with this? So I left the hospital in that positive mode because, I had that strength of God in me. But the world and the realization of this disease started to take hold. And I looked at the internet and I was trying to find answers. How do I fight this disease? What do I do to beat it? And all I found was tons of drugs and things to take and people on chat rooms with MS that were talking about how depressed they are and how they want to kill themselves and, how their life is ruined. And it just started to get to me. And, I had all of those negative thoughts in my mind at that point. So I started going down the path of being a little depressed. I went into the hospital pretty much 190 pounds in a pretty good shape. And I went home and I started to deteriorate. Everything started to fall apart on me. I was in a really terrible marriage that I knew had to end, and this was the time it was going to end. So that happened. I couldn't get my mind clear enough to work anymore. So everything that I was doing in the television business was out the door, and I had sold some major shows to Fox, and I had a big animation project I was working on, and things were going great. And I was flying back and forth to California and doing all these things. I couldn't continue. So that stopped. So between being divorced, losing my business, losing my health, they say one thing is bad enough to happen, a divorce or a health problem. I had everything happening at one time. And all I had was my faith in God to be able to get through those times. And God challenged me. I mean, He just kept challenging me. I had to survive. I had no money left. I had no business left. My health was gone. And I was trying to figure out, how do I survive? How do I deal with this? Where's that resilience? How do I get back to being resilient like I was when I was healthy and I had to overcome obstacles? And it took me literally a year and a half. Now, Darren said I was 47, but actually when I met Darren, I was close to, I think I was 49 at that point, almost at that point. And I had gone down to about 160 pounds, and I had pretty much no muscle left because I was sitting at home just trying to survive and figure out what my next move was, and praying every day and reading God's Word, and going into the Bible to find scripture about strength and why God does what He does and allows things to happen. I read Job and I read everything else, Joseph and all the terrible things that happened to these guys, and I tried to grab strength from that. And I started to slowly come out of my fog of having this MS. But I started to think to myself, was my life really about serving God, or was my life really about just becoming successful at what I did? Now, one thing I didn't tell you is during this time before I had MS, I really was rooted in God, and I became a youth pastor, and I helped build youth ministries, and I did a lot of things that I thought were for God and for His kingdom. But through this challenge of God really testing me, I started to realize, what? I was really doing those things for myself because I felt good, and I felt I was doing things to help people. And look at what I was doing, and look at how I'm helping, and all that. But was I serving God, and was I really in my heart doing what He wanted me to do? So I felt this huge challenge of God, and I felt that He was telling me to be resilient because there's a bigger purpose here. So like I said, I slowly started to come out of this fog and started to have that attitude of, okay, God, you show me. So on my 49th birthday, I'm back. I get myself back into gym slowly. I'm heading towards my 49th birthday. I don't work out with anybody. I go there alone. I kind of sneak in when nobody's around there early in the morning. It was celebration gym that's connected to the hospital. And it was always quiet real early in the morning, and I'd go in there, I'd sneak around and do my thing, just trying to get myself back into this positive attitude. But on December 10th of 2007, which was my 49th birthday, I looked into the mirror and I made a decision to change the course of my life and let God push me along and let Him test my resilience. And I didn't know how yet, but I knew something was coming because I felt God in that, how God talks to you in His way and He turns you into a direction that He wants you to go. I felt He was doing that. And I knew that there was a plan. So I put on the armor of God, and I went to battle. Now remember, the primary factor in resilience is having positive relationships. So it was my relationship with God that enabled me to push forward. He was my resilience. He was that positive force in my life that resilience talks about. Resilience isn't talking about how strong you are. Resilience is talking about how you have relationships that are positive, that make you resilient. And God was my relationship that made me resilient. For anybody else here, it could be a family member, a loved one, your significant other, whatever that might be. For me, it was God. So God then used other positive relationships to reinforce my resilience. And that's when, like Darren said, I met one of my neighbors who was a bodybuilder who worked out with Darren. And he came over and he would come to see me while I was going through all this and kept giving me positive feedback. You know, Dave, you're a strong guy. Dave, you got to get back into the gym. Dave, you got to come work out with me. And I kept saying, John, I don't want to, I'm embarrassed. I don't want to go into the gym. I'm going to fall over. I don't have the muscle. I want to keep myself covered. I don't want anybody to see me like this. And John just one day came up, and he's a big enough guy to do it. And he picked me up and he said, I'm taking you. And he threw me in the car and he brought me to the gym, and that's when I met Darren, you know. And there was no saying no to a guy throwing you in the car and dragging you to the gym. And then I get there, and then I get this other knucklehead with muscles telling me that I've got to work out. So, you know, this was how things had to happen. And I knew that these guys were going to help me. And then, as Darren said, after a few months of doing this, I basically said to him, you know what, I want to do something that nobody with MS has ever done, especially at my age. Now, I will say that, you know, and I've investigated and found out there were guys, there was a gentleman that was a Mr. America that ended up getting MS later and never was able to compete again. And now there are people that I'm reaching out to, I speak to all over the world that have MS, that are now bodybuilding, and I'm helping them to get on the stage and do this. But at the time that I went to Darren, nobody had ever done this before. And Darren thought I was a little crazy, but I said, no, I'm serious, I want to do this, and he agreed to do it. And what we did is we over a little bit of time, we called it the MS Bodybuilding Challenge, which was kind of born in January of 2008. And Darren and I started training for this. And what that was is I was challenging myself. I wasn't thinking of anybody else. I wasn't trying to do this to be an inspiration, to be honest, or encourage anybody. I wanted to survive. There was my resilience. I had to get back to that feeling of success and victory and being a champion. So my resilience said, preserve yourself and become something again. And Darren helped me to do that, and we trained, and we said, let's pick a contest to work towards. The funny thing was, is Darren kept telling me, you know, with MS, you better be real careful because you could hurt yourself. You don't feel things. And I didn't listen to Darren. So I tore my hamstrings twice, little tears, and it wasn't, you know, that bad. But in April of 2008, after Darren warned me a number of times, stop ego lifting. You don't need to bench press 400 pounds. I went to the gym, and I had to ego lift. So I did my normal warm-ups and got to my 400-pound bench presses, and 1, 2, 3, fourth one, tore my pec right off. And people that know medical backgrounds, you're going to understand how painful and what that means. I didn't tear it a little, I tore it in half. So God is now testing my resilience again, all right? What do? I become the poster child of resilience, okay? Not only do I have MS, but I'm tearing these muscles, and now I've got this huge torn muscle that is basically unrepairable. And I convinced my doctor, who's a sports medicine doctor in Celebration, to repair it. And he said, Dave, the chances of a muscle holding, because I didn't tear the tendon or the ligaments or anything, I tore the muscle. And to repair a muscle to a muscle is like taking butter and trying to get butter to stick together. So he repaired it, and he tried to make it stick. And he told me that I would have 6 months minimum to recover before I could even train hard again. And I'm very, very stubborn. So in 3 weeks, okay, I'm back in the gym, and I'm training, okay? But I can't lift heavy, and I determined that I'm going to compete in this 2009 contest. So several more months go by. It's now September 2008. I'm faced with this torn pec. I've got a contest scheduled for June. It's less than a year away. I keep training for the goal, but I know that there's a lot of delays and there's going to be, bumps in the road because of what I did to myself, not listening to my trainer. But I knew that God had more planned for me. And, like I said, I kept training. So God, in His wisdom, knows that I need somebody else in my life. And I knew that there had to be a wife that God wanted me to be with, someone He would choose with His ever-knowing wisdom, and He wasn't going to let me make any more mistakes. So He wanted me to be with a woman that I'd spend the rest of my life with, and He wasn't going to let anything go wrong and put it in my hands. Now, I'm old school, I'm an old guy, so, we go back to meeting people face to face, and, that's how you meet people. But not anymore, not in this day and age. Everything's on the internet, and, there's online dating. So I go on ChristianSingles.com, and I'm, looking through all this stuff and, wondering what's going on here, what God's doing. And I put in there Orlando. I don't put Nebraska. I don't put New York. I put people in Orlando. I mean, first of all, I don't really drive anymore with the MS, so where am I going to go? So I put Orlando in there, and I'm looking through, and, Kendra, my wife now, pops up, and she's in California. And I pass her because this woman is in California. And that little voice in my head says, go back. And I go back. God's voice brought me to the greatest gift I could ever imagine. And He has a great sense of humor. Now, here I am. There's a picture of me. Okay, here's my profile picture. I'm sitting on a custom chopper like this with the tattoos, the earrings, the muscles sticking out, and flexing and doing all this stuff. I'm a guy, I'm from the streets of New York. I grew up in the gangs, and I lived a violent life until God took a hold of me, and that's a whole nother story that will take us 2 hours to get into, and we won't go down that road. But, who does God want me to marry? He finds me this sweet nurse who's brought up in a church, who was on the mission field in Haiti while I'm riding with bikers, okay? Two polar opposites with one common denominator, and that was Jesus. And God knew to keep me resilient, He had to give me an ultimate relationship. Again, that positive person in my life that would make the difference between being resilient and not being resilient. And He chose Kendra for me. And who was I to question God? So I knew that getting married to Kendra was really what God wanted me to do. And of course, He's always right. And I saw her heart as we started to get to know each other. And I saw who she was. And I fell more in love with her every day that we would talk. And we were flying back and forth. And, my goal was to marry this woman. Pretty much after the first conversation, I knew that God had picked the right person. But, you don't get married in a day. I mean, at least most people don't. But, so, we went back and forth in trips. And on my last trip in 2009, I looked into my beautiful wife's eyes, and I asked her to marry me. We got married in California on April 9th of 2009, immediately moved back to Orlando so I could continue to train with Darren towards the contest. I was resilient in this goal. Again, we'll use the word resilience. And even if it meant Kendra had to relocate herself and give up everything she was doing, and she was an RN in California, and she said, okay, I will come back with you to Florida. I won't stay there forever, but you have a goal, and I'm going to stick by you through this goal. And we worked at it, and she worked here in Orlando as a nurse while I was training. And we picked a different contest because it was unrealistic, the contest I had originally picked because of this torn pec situation. And we picked the Florida State Bodybuilding Championships, which was in August of 2009. Now, let me explain to you what the Florida State Bodybuilding Championship is. And probably Darren could explain it better than me, because I had been out of bodybuilding competitions for 25 years. The last time I stepped on stage, I was in my 20s, and now I'm going to be 50 years old. So Darren picks a level 5 bodybuilding contest. Not a level 1, but a bodybuilding contest that qualifies you to become a professional. And I'm nowhere near that level at all at this point. I'm just happy I'm walking. So we're training, to get there, and I'm whittling myself down, dieting, and poor Kendra's having to watch me with the irritability of the diet and the whole thing that you do bodybuilding. Stuck by me and kept pushing me along, and there was a time I almost didn't even want to go and do it. I started, getting kind of tired, and the MS was bothering me. And, some of the symptoms with MS that I still have, and I had during this training, was I still don't feel anything on my left side. It's like I can't squeeze my fingers all the way. I don't feel anything. If you stab me with a knife in my left arm, wouldn't feel it. They drag my left leg. If you see me walk, you'll see that leg drag. Sometimes it doesn't lift, and I'll trip. In and out of the machines when I work out, my current training partner literally lifts my leg out, puts it in, helps me up. There are times that I'll even lose my balance doing different type of dumbbell movements. I strap my hands to the dumbbells so I don't drop them. My left leg shakes uncontrollably when I push myself too far because of the nervous system. But I still needed to do this. And I did what nobody did before. At the age of 50, I stood on stage at the Florida State Bodybuilding Championships in August of 2009 with guys 30 pounds and more, bigger than me, looked like they never missed a meal or a workout. And here I was at 176 pounds, and I had come down from 216 to get there. And these guys backstage were the nicest guys I've ever met. They encouraged me. They said I was an inspiration to them. They had seen me on some of our YouTube videos that Darren and I were shooting of me training. I did what I said I was going to do and what I set out to do. And even that day, I almost didn't want to go back to the night show to final competition because I felt so tiny next to these guys. But my wife said to me when I got home, she said, "This is not about how big you are, and this is not about that you look like the biggest bodybuilder on that stage. This is about the accomplishment that you've had doing what you're doing, and that you're standing here doing what nobody else has done, and that God has given you the strength and the resilience to do this. That's what it's about." And even the promoter of the show said the same thing to me. He said, "I don't care how big these guys are. That's not what you're here for. You're here to make a point, and you're making that point." And when I came back to that night show, and I stood on stage wobbling and trying to hold a pose with my legs shaking and knowing that these guys have blown me away, that there's no way I'm winning anything, I'm standing there, and you can't see anything because it's black. And all I hear is every pose I'm making, cheering. And later, Kendra tells me that they were giving me a standing ovation on just me being there. And at the end of the night, after everybody got their trophies, they handed me a trophy this big for the most inspirational bodybuilder. And to me, that was more important than winning a contest. It showed me that I can be resilient through anything. And with the power of God and His strength and me relying on Him and not my own abilities and not looking to how big or strong or great or successful or victorious David was, I looked at how big and strong and successful and victorious my God was. That's why I got what I got, and that's why I triumphed and why I accomplished what I did that night. So if you're paying attention to the beginning of what I was saying, the most important aspect of resilience is having positive relationships to support that. I had God, I had Darren, and I had John, who originally took me to the gym. And along the way, other people came and supported what we were doing and said to me, we want to help you get and reach this goal. For over 6 years now, the most important part of my resilience, the most important and most positive relationship other than that with Jesus, was with Kendra. Because Kendra has stood by me now for 6 years through the insanity of training as hard as I do. My sometimes irrational commitment to my choices, because some of these things that I do, I would not recommend anybody with MS doing. You know, I tell other people with MS, get into fitness and exercise, but don't do what I'm doing. I've had all sorts of setbacks and operations and you know, relapses, and Kendra stood by me. She's been the light in the darkest days that I've had with MS, and with God encourages me to take MS head on and beat it. Now, I don't know how you become resilient without that type of positive support. And this is what enabled me to do it. Again, I don't ever want anybody to look at me and go, you know, you're doing a great job and it's amazing what you're accomplishing. Because without God and without Kendra and without people like Darren in my life, there's no way I can do this. It's not about me. It's about the relationships. It's about the people that are positive in your life that make the difference between you being resilient and you not being resilient. Now, is having resilience worth it all? Okay, that's always a question. Is it worth all of the ups and downs? Is it worth the pain? Is it worth the struggles and the things that I have to do on a daily basis just to deal with MS to be resilient? Well, I'll let you answer that question, because right now, what God is doing in my life and in Kendra's life, because of the fact that I've remained resilient, is He's enabled us to form a charity called the MS Fitness Challenge. Now, this was Kendra's idea. I did not start out wanting to be an inspiration, like I said. This was not about me helping anybody. It was about survival. But after I competed, Kendra said, great, okay, you want to do it again. I understand that, but how are you helping other people? What are you doing to show other people resilience and giving them that positive person that they can look up to be resilient like you did? And she said, I think we need to forget the MS Bodybuilding Challenge. I think we need to form the MS Fitness Challenge, where you now are encouraging others and helping others all across the country do what you're doing in beating the disease through fitness and health. It's not about bodybuilding. You know, people look at me and go, I don't want to be a bodybuilder. You know, I can't do that. I don't care. You don't have to be a bodybuilder. For somebody that has MS or any type of obstacle, disease, disability, it's moving, it's positive thinking, it's the way of you being able to beat the disease in the way in your heart and in your mind works for you. And again, for me, it's God. For other people, it's something else. But that's why we do it. So we have this charity, the MS Fitness Challenge. And not only is it starting to help, because we started about a year or so ago, not only is it starting to help people here in the United States, but I have people all over the world reaching out to me that have MS, telling me that they saw me, that they want the MS Fitness Challenge to come to their country. We've been in Minnesota, we've been here in Florida, we've been in San Diego, California, we're going to Denver in December, we've got Houston in 2015, again back in Fort Lauderdale, and then we have some people in Northern California that want us to come up there, and also in Texas. And what we do is we set up a 12-week challenge for people with MS, and we help them through trainers that we pay for through the charity to be able to get into the gym and exercise and work out and conquer the disease through health and fitness. And we give them ongoing support and education and just all sorts of things that are enabling them to fight the disease on a day-to-day basis. That's what all this is all about, and that's where we ended up going down the path of helping others that have MS. But again, I'm now, because of God's blessings and grace and his ability to give me that resilience, I'm considered the face of MS and fitness, and I write for everydayhealth.com, which reaches 30 million unique visitors every month. This is a website that people like Jillian Michaels from the Biggest Loser have columns, and they gave me my own column called the MS Fitness Challenge. My production company, Bishop Lyons Entertainment, is partners with some of the biggest people in the industry, producers of Duck Dynasty, producers of the show Mob Wives, Hell's Kitchen, partners with people like Damon John from Shark Tank. These are things that God has blessed me with because I became resilient and I allowed him to allow me to be resilient. And your resilience has to come from what's within you, not from me. You know, don't try to look at what I'm doing and think, okay, well, I've got to follow what he's doing. You do what you need to do to be resilient. You find those positive relationships in your life, whether it's the relationship with God or, again, a family member or whoever that is, because that positive relationship is what's going to help you be resilient. Resilience is not your inner drive. Resilience isn't that you're determined to do something. Resilience is what you do with the relationships in your life and how you utilize that positivity to overcome obstacles and become something victorious and successful in what you want to do in life. And thank you so much for listening to me tonight. It was a pleasure being here, and I hope that I helped you to get to that resilient stage.
Thank you, David. So we have some time for some questions. If you want to take a seat, and that'd be fine. We have mics on either side. If there are any questions that folks have. Now, I have a brother who has MS, so I can relate to this. Now, is yours the progressive kind, the remitting kind?
Well, originally they called it relapsing remitting. But with the amount of lesions and the time that I've had with the disease, the doctors say it's more progressive than it is at that stage. And technically, I shouldn't be walking.
That's great. Yes, a question over here.
How you doing, David? My name is Justin Kennard. I just want to say I'm really proud of you, and your story is amazing. And
Thank
just
you.
your perspective on how you ended that on, don't follow necessarily your path, but follow your path, man. It really shows God in your life. And on my end, my testimony is more dealing with depression, suicide, and overcoming that. And we've started a business called Armor of Light 1312, similar to you, and it's just trying to find a mentor now and someone to look up to. And what would be your recommendation to kind of, because I like to be a motivational speaker and inspirational speaker like you, how did you start and kind of get your foot in the door, so to speak?
Well, it's a really great question. I didn't do anything. God did everything. It just came to me. I didn't reach out to Everyday Health to write for them. They reached out to me. I didn't reach out to the publisher to write my book. I didn't even want to write a book. It wasn't in my game plan. They came to me and said, we want you to write the book. If you follow in God's path, you don't have to worry about planning on how things are going to happen. God will let them happen, and he'll make them happen. He'll put the people in your life that he's supposed to put there. Again, I have to, my wife hates this because, she doesn't like the spotlight on her or anything, but I have to say that, just in the connection that God had me with my wife and being able to find her, I didn't find her.
You know, I was looking in Orlando, and he brought me somebody in California. So if you're asking me what I'm doing, I'm not doing anything. I'm just following the will of God, and I'm making sure that I'm in his will. And if you do that, everything's going to come. You're going to end up being a mentor to somebody else. You'll end up speaking where you need to speak. And people will listen to you, and they'll want to hear what you have to say because God will make that path for you. So again, don't look to man for anything. Just look to God and put it in prayer and hand yourself to him, and he will make it happen. But, you know, my hat's off to you. You know, you inspire me. Just because I'm doing what I'm doing, I still get inspired by people that overcome other things. I mean, it's amazing how resilient people can be, and most people don't even know what that word means. And that's why I made it a point to really explain it. But you're resilient, and that resilience is going to get you those things that you want.
You know, I wonder if we shouldn't put a face with the name here. I think she's blushing a little bit, so we love that humility. Yes, over here.
Thank you again. You're really amazing.
Thank you.
So I was just going to ask you a little bit about, you know, you made the comment about the contrast and how the first physician and then the second neurologist came in. And I wonder if you can't give us some tips as both educators and students coming into healthcare market. How can we, what would you say that you inspire us to be resilient, but how do we make that distinction to come up and meet your needs and to be part of your partnership?
Are you saying about like what happened to me, how the doctor misdiagnosed and how we try to avoid that, or?
Well, and the things you've learned in these last, 6 to 8 years as healthcare partners, people that have been part of your journey,
Right.
and recognizing your resilience, because some of this is, as we see you, is you are not as the textbooks tell us.
Right.
So how do we think beyond that and become more open to being a better healthcare worker?
I think the most important thing is listening, and I think what happened with my first quick diagnosis is the doctor wasn't listening. You know, he looked at something and he made an assumption. He didn't listen to me, and he wasn't listening to really his own sense of being a doctor. He should have listened to that, because I'm telling you, I know in the back of his head he probably said, this guy needs some more tests. But he didn't do it, and he jumped to it. So I think listening is more important than anything else. You know, listening to patients when they talk to you, and they know their bodies better than somebody else. You know, when I told people I'm not going to be in a wheelchair, they said, no, you're crazy. You're going to be in a wheelchair because this is what the disease does. But I know myself, and I knew my body, and I knew my God, and I said that's not going to happen. So I think listening is most important to get that connection and to really understand people and know how to work with people in their different circumstance.
Over here.
David, I'd like to thank you. You're a huge inspiration. I'm in my first year of being diagnosed with MS, and I've also, by faith, claimed that I won't have the results that they're saying that I will. I can see, based off of the way you're standing there and you were able to walk up there, that you're beating the disease. But have you had any test results after your workout regimen that have shown any differences based off of your workout? Have you had any doctors confirm that it is affecting maybe the lesions and how quickly they are growing and things of that nature?
Again, that's a really great point. You have to really understand that what I'm doing is not good for MS. I actually push myself beyond the point that I should. I'm doing it because I want people to look at me as somebody that's willing to sacrifice themselves for the better of everybody. But when you look at fitness shouldn't be pushed as far as I push it. When you have MS, bodybuilding and competing in bodybuilding contests is probably the last thing you want to do, because your nervous system can only handle so much. Typically, and Darren could tell you this as a healthy bodybuilder, he's got injuries right now because he's pushed himself too far. But when you have MS, your nerves can only go a certain distance, and then you're hurting it. I have more lesions now. The last time I looked, what did I have, 12? How many? 13 lesions in my brain. I only started out with 4 or 5. I had 2 in my spine. Luckily, that hasn't increased. But pushing myself beyond those limits has probably worsened the disease internally. But I fight it, and I'm able to do things that most people that have the disease at my stage won't be able to do. My answer to you is there are people that I'm helping worldwide and keeping them in a fitness routine and a health routine, not the bodybuilding road, who are doing tremendously better. They're taking anti-inflammatory supplements and things like that so that the lesions do shrink a little bit. They're able to move better, their relapses are better. Everybody's different. This disease is so different for different people. My suggestion is to get into a fitness program that is at the level where you're not pushing yourself beyond the shaking. You don't want the leg to start shaking like mine does and things like that when you're working out. And eliminate the garbage foods that poison your body and eat as healthy as possible. And you'll start feeling different. You know, you'll mentally is a big part of MS, because mentally, if you start having a real positive outlook of what this disease is and how you're going to beat it, you're going to do a lot better than if you start focusing on the disease itself. So the distraction of fitness alone makes a big difference in beating the disease. But reach out to me, and I'll help you, I'll email you, and I'll help you through some of the things that you can do to get on a good routine that won't push you too far.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Over here.
Hi. Sorry, I'm short. Thank you for coming out and speaking. It was really nice to listen to you. I just have a question. I know a lot of Adventist University students are going out to be healthcare providers, and students working to be physical therapists, occupational therapists, and are in that area. And I know probably with MS you may have had caregivers in that area. Do you actively get physical therapy or occupational therapy or even speech therapy?
No. There's a simple answer. I have bucked the system from day one. They've wanted to give me physical therapy. In fact, when I was living in Florida, I went to Medicaid, or whatever they call it here. In California, it's Medi-Cal, but I think it's Medicaid here, because they wanted to diagnose whether I was really disabled or not. And I went into the doctor, and there's a Medicaid doctor, and she did all these tests on me, and she brought me in her office and started crying. And she said, she was a Christian woman, and she said, "You need a walker. You walk like this, and you're going to fall over, you're going to hurt yourself one day. You really should have a walker for safety." And I said, "I'm not using anything. I'm not using a walker. Forget it. I'm going to walk if I have to hold on to things." So you're asking the wrong guy about physical therapy and things. My wife always says to me, "Why don't you go for physical therapy, because you can't move your leg the right way?" I just keep saying, I'm going down the path I'm going, and for me, I don't want physical therapy, and I don't take MS medications. I don't want to go down that path. I'm actually going for stem cells. And there's a company that is working with me that already extracted the cells and have harvested 130 million cells. They're sending us out of the country to the Caymans, because the government here won't let us do it. Put those stem cells back in, and we'll see. That I'll do, because that's a natural thing within my body that they're putting back in, and we'll see if we get the miraculous results that they have been getting, and it reverses some of these symptoms and takes away some of the MS. But other than that, I'm just not the guy that goes for physical therapy. I'm the guy that goes into the gym with my 30-year-old training partner and makes him beg me to stop training. So.
Yes, over here.
Yes, I'm happy to hear that you mentioned nutrition. That's important. Nutrition.
Yes, yes.
Any green drinks?
Green drinks are absolutely fantastic. Green drinks, anti-inflammatory, like turmeric and ginger and things like that. High doses of vitamin D. omega-3s, anything, anti-inflammatory foods, watermelon and melons and blueberries and anything that's anti-inflammatory is definitely going to help anybody with an autoimmune disease. So nutrition is a tremendous part of it. I can't say that I don't eat McDonald's once in a while, because I do. But on the way to a bodybuilding contest, Darren would never let me eat McDonald's. But nutrition is extremely important.
All right.
What would you say to the individual who has MS that is in a wheelchair?
I deal with that a lot. In fact, I have friends that are in wheelchairs that have MS. Everybody's different, like I said, and the disease works differently in different people. And, just because I'm not in a wheelchair doesn't mean that somebody else shouldn't be using a wheelchair if they need it. But, and I wrote a couple of columns for Everyday Health about this. There are exercises you can do in a wheelchair. They're bands, and you can put them around the wheelchair wheels and just move, because the more you move, the better it's going to be, not only physically but mentally for you. So even in a wheelchair, there are things: eat healthy, do movement, exercise, do something to counteract the disease, because if you don't, this disease will just eat you away eventually.
Yeah, and I know from my brother, who's now 57 and in a wheelchair, I think the positive attitude that you've shown is the thing that he works to maintain, and whatever that means in the context that is his life. So I think that's the important point of inspiration. Well, thank you very much. Let's thank him for his. So let's have a closing prayer, and then we'll let David make his way back to the lobby, and there'll be some time back there when you can have some signed books and so forth. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for the inspiration of tonight. Continue to bless David in the work that he's doing, inspiring others. Continue to bless his family and the circle of friends as well, who help him to build and keep his resilience. Most of all, we thank you for your love and interest not only in his life, but in ours as well. Be with us as we go back to our homes. We pray that you'll keep us safe. Amen. Thank you for coming.